We are so very pleased to welcome back to the show the lovely and talented Ann Moses. Ann began working for Tiger Beat magazine in 1966 and became the magazine's editor from 1968 to 1972. Along the way, she's reported on and made friendships with just about every artist from the 60s. In our past interviews with Ann, we've talked about her work with Elvis Presley and the Monkees and the Who. Well, there's a host of other 60s acts we didn't get to, and this time around we're going to circle back and talk about a few more acts that we didn't get to last time. Ann Moses, welcome back to the show.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you. And you know, I started off by playing the Dave Clark Five because based on one of our past conversations, they're the reason that you got into reporting on rock and pop music to begin with.
They certainly were.
Yeah.
They played a key role in my interest in getting into the whole rock and roll thing.
Well, as I was looking at various Tiger Beat covers online, I noticed that Paul Revere and the Raiders, and particularly Mark Lindsay, got a lot of attention and were fan favorites. When did you first meet them? First
introduction to them was February of 1966. I had started to work as an intern at Tiger Beat in January of 66.
Mm-hmm.
I had not met them. I'd been sent out on a few assignments, and they came trooping into the Tiger Beat offices, and nobody had given me a heads up about this. And here they were in their full Raider gear, the hats, the velvet coats, the whole thing. They were carrying not a life size, probably bigger than life size. It was as big as Mark Lindsay, a tiger. And they were saying, congratulations on your 1-year anniversary, Tiger Beat. Now, it was not technically the 1-year anniversary because that would be September of 66. The first issue was September of 65.
Right.
But they knew they wanted to do this thing, and they knew it would be a few months lead time for that to come out in the actual 1-year anniversary issue.
They were pros. They were thinking ahead.
Somebody was. And, and I don't know if it was us reaching out to them or vice versa, but it was such hilarity. I mean, they just came in, and it was almost like they were putting on a show. I mean, they just were their crazy selves. They goofed around. We went up on the roof, and the Tiger Beat photographer took all kinds of pictures of them. And I have a favorite picture of I call it the Headlock series, and Phil Fang Volk has my head in a headlock.
Right.
And it was a great introduction. And from that point on, it would turn out I would see them quite often. I would go out to where the action is set many, many times. And then in July, I'm thinking, I can't remember if it was July or August. I think it was July of that year. I did go on tour with them for a week. That was cooler than I could ever imagine. The co-headliners were Dino, Dizzy, and Billy. And then when I went on tour with them in November, they toured with the Standells, who had just come off opening for the Rolling Stones for their summer tour.
Wow.
So it was a great 2 weeks out of my life.
I bet. So let me ask you, do you have a favorite Paul Revere and the Raiders track? And if so, we'll play it right now.
I would have to say Kicks.
Okay.
Just so easy to sing along to, and so, not that all their songs aren't energetic, but I can remember seeing them perform it on stage, so I really, really love that one.
We're talking with Ann Moses, former editor of Tiger Beat magazine, and you can catch up with what Ann's doing these days on her website, annmoses.com, and of course on Facebook. Just look for Ann Moses. You know, I've noticed in a lot of the photos of you with these various bands, and you mentioned it too, the headlock photo, a lot of them seem to be playing with your hair or putting you in a headlock. It seems like you almost had kind of a kid-sister relationship.
Well, so many of them were very close to my age or a little bit older. So, I mean, we were all just teenagers goofing off, having fun. Certainly the Raiders, that was their standard operating procedure, to be crazy, to always have some kind of antics or jokes going on. And certainly I realized that when I toured with them, because that's the way they are 24/7.
But I remember you saying that you were kind of camera shy.
I even did a blog piece on this, and it's like whenever I had to appear on a television show, which I occasionally was asked to do, or be in pictures, I was just not that comfortable. You know, I was not meant to be on a stage. I was meant to be backstage and talking to the stars.
Right. Well, one of the stars you got to know who was maybe a little closer to the age group that was actually buying and reading Tiger Beat magazine was Peter Noon of Herman's Hermits.
I would say yes, because he was like 16, I think, when he started, maybe 15, and I met him at 17, and we were the same age, and you know, just somewhat like the boy next door, except for the extraordinary talent.
Right.
I remember when I first went up to interview Herman and his Hermits. They were just sitting around a house they had rented up in Beverly Hills. I was working for Rhythm and News, a little tiny local newspaper at the time, and it was just like a bunch of teenagers being together. And at one point, Peter just said, "You want to ride on the motorbike with me?" And I said, "Well, heck yes." So we climb on a motorbike and go riding through the hills of Beverly.
And do you have a favorite Herman's Hermit song?
Oh, it's funny. The one that always sticks in my head is She's a Must to Avoid. This is not my favorite. But the reason is because when I first heard it, I thought they were saying, "She's a muscular boy." And if you listen to the song, next time you listen to it, see if you don't hear that, along with "She's a Must to Avoid."
WFDU FM.
We're back talking with former editor of Tiger Beat magazine, Ann Moses. I want to move on to the time you met the Rolling Stones. Was that similar to Herman's Hermits? I mean, did they take you on a motorbike ride?
If only. No, that was a different situation. I never anticipated being able to meet the Rolling Stones. I mean, they were up there, you know, the Beatles and the Stones were up there way at the top of the list. With early on, they had several huge hit records. They were appearing where the Hermits might be appearing in a 5,000-seat auditorium. The Stones were appearing at places like the Cow Palace, which is, I don't know, probably seats 30,000 people. And the way I actually was able to meet them, I had become friends of the Jefferson Airplane. And this is before Grace Slick was the lead singer. And I went to a couple of recording sessions down in Hollywood with them. And we were just casual friends, and so they needed a ride to the airport because they had come in to record for just a couple of days. And I said, "Well, I'll drive you to the airport, no big deal." So I'm driving them out to the airport, and I'm with Spencer Dryden, who's the drummer, and Paul Cantner.
Yep.
So I'm pulling up to drop them off at the gate, and they said, "Well, why don't you just come up with us?" And I'm going, "Well, that's pretty crazy. You know, I'm in my little dress, and I've got my purse, and I've got my camera with me, and nothing else. And, you know, how can I do that?" And they go, "Don't worry about it. Let's just do this thing." And I thought, well, why not? So I pulled my car into the parking garage, went and climbed on a plane. And in those days, you literally could climb on PSA Airlines, Pacific Southwest Airlines, if you had a credit card, you could give them a credit card for your ticket. You know, if there was a seat on the plane, you just walked on the plane, even before you paid. And they literally would run your credit card, or they would accept cash, just like if you were buying a drink on the plane. You would buy your ticket on the plane. So that's how long ago it was. So we flew up to San Francisco. We went to their little their flat, which was one of the traditional San Francisco 2-story walk-ups. And then they said, "Hey, we're going to go out. Let's grab your camera and let's go out." And I said, "Okay." And they really hadn't said anything else. So as we're driving in the car, they said, "Oh, by the way, we're opening for the Rolling Stones tonight at the Cow Palace." And I'm going, "No way. I can't believe this." And I'm just silently saying, "Oh, my God, oh, my God."
Right, sure.
So we go in backstage. The Stones haven't arrived yet. Everybody's just hanging out, visiting with one another. And all of a sudden, these black limousines drive right into the backstage area, through the doors that raise up. And out steps the Rolling Stones. And, I'm just kind of flabbergasted because I never thought I'd be that close to them. And then they proceeded to kind of go in their dressing rooms, get ready for the show. The airplane went on. They were great. I watched them from the side of the stage. And then there were some other acts in between. I think Sop with Camel, and I can't remember who else. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, somebody went and knocked on Mick Jagger's dressing room door, told him that Joan Baez, who he had become friends with, was outside. So he came out to talk to Joan Baez. And then little by little, the rest of the Stones came out, and they were visiting with her. And then I don't really know how it happened, but before you know it, I'm talking to Mick Jagger, and he's going, well, where are you from? In that heavy British accent. Right. And I said, well, I'm from Anaheim, where Disneyland is. And then he went into a whole thing about, oh, I want to go to Disneyland, and on. And it was like, really? I'd be happy to escort you. But we stood around and chatted for a good 5 minutes, and again, something I never anticipated. So it was all off the top of my head, and I'm sure it was a little on the insipid side of trying to make conversation with this superstar. But but then what I also wasn't counting on is that when they went on stage, the security guards, there was an area of security in front of the 6-foot-tall stage. And because I had a camera on and I was I was coming from backstage, it was like they thought it was cool for me to stand right beneath the stage and shoot a whole lot of amazing pictures. So I was able, luckily I had enough film with me. I had a couple of rolls of black and white film, and I got some just wonderful shots. And who would have thought that when I was dropping Paul and Spencer off at the airport?
Now, were you able to run those photos in Tiger Beat?
Oh, yeah. It came out. My secret, what was it called? My secret time with the Rolling Stones. They came up with some good Tiger Beat type headlines.
Right. And do you have a favorite Rolling Stones song?
That would have to be Brown Sugar.
We're talking with Ann Moses, former editor of Tiger Beat, today on the Vintage Rock and Pop Shop. And again, you can find out more about Ann at annmoses.com and look for Ann Moses on Facebook. Well, you couldn't get much different from the Rolling Stones than you could with the Partridge Family. And obviously, after the phenomenal success of the Monkees on television and in music, I would think the next big teen sensation that Tiger Beat covered was David Cassidy and the Partridge Family.
Well, just for accuracy's sake, there was one teen idol in between, and that was Bobby Sherman.
Oh, yes, that's right.
So right following the Monkees, Here Come the Brides was aired on Screen Gems. filmed out at Columbia Ranch, was where all the outdoor things for the Monkees were filmed.
Mm-hmm.
So for the next year and a half, Bobby was the big sensation after the Monkees.
Right.
And then, Screen Gems at that point was really on a roll. They first started to negotiate with the Cowsills to do a television show on the Cowsills, a mother singing with her kids. But from what I have read, they had already signed Shirley Jones to star in the Partridge Family series, which was to be, based on the Cowsills. But they wanted the Cowsill kids. And the father who was managing the family, he just insisted that it be his wife or there was no deal. And
right.
So they basically dropped out at that point, and then it just became this fictitious Partridge Family. And I can't recall if they did audition some of the Cowsill kids. And as talented as they were vocally, I don't think they could compare acting-wise
right.
to the family that was put together to become the Partridge Family. But David Cassidy, he was definitely chosen from the past experience that Screen Gems had with creating a television show, which would in turn create a teenage idol and singing star. They were so well versed in that they had the formula down at that point.
Now, were you invited to come to the set and report on what was happening?
Yes, very much like the Monkees. My publisher basically contracted with, this is during the Monkey days, for us to exclusively run the columns called Monkey Talk and some of the other features that were monthly items in the magazine. And because he had licensed some of those things, then we just had entree to the set whenever all I had to do was make a phone call.
Right.
We had the same setup with Bobby Sherman and Here Come the Brides. We did a beauty column with the female star of Here Come the Brides, Bridget Handley, and so we were doing the same type of thing. So when the Partridge Family came along, he locked in some of those rights, the rights to the Tiger Beat's official Partridge Family magazine. We had My Brother Danny by Cecilia Bonaducci. We had David and Susan answer your questions, and
right.
readers would write their questions in. And although they didn't write those, I would ask them the questions, and then it would end up in the magazine, whatever their answers were. So it was authentic in that regard.
Right.
We featured all of them because the whole show was a hit. Of course, David stood out because he began touring, and it was another, pop sensation born of one of these TV shows. I mean, it was a perfect franchise. You introduce them on weeknight family television viewing hour, and you've got your built-in audience, and then with a record and a tour set up,
right.
I mean, it's overnight superstar.
So do you have a favorite Partridge Family song we can play?
Well, I would say their theme song, but that isn't one of David's best. Oh, that's a hard one, because I by that time I was not putting David's albums in my record player at home and
right.
listening to them. I was into, maybe I was listening to Nielsen albums. I was still listening to the Beatles. By that time, I was listening to Elvis after his comeback,
sure.
and so that would be a tough one for me. You did catch me off guard.
Okay,
on that
well,
one.
I mean, you mentioned the theme song, and why not? Ann Moses, former editor of Tiger Beat, is our guest today on the Vintage Rock and Pop Shop, and I think we can mention that your book, your long-awaited memoir, is coming out next year.
Correct. We're looking at probably March at the earliest, and hopefully April at the latest. And there'll be stories that you have not read before, because there's some stuff that I wouldn't have dared printed in Tiger Beat at the time.
And before I let you go, I understand that you had a flashback to your days at Tiger Beat, because you went and saw and got backstage at the Monkees' recent tour.
Correct. I did see them just about 5 miles from my house. I live in Arizona now, and they were here 3 years ago. And it was Peter, Mickey, and Mike.
Right.
And then I did get to have a reunion with Mickey and Peter. Mike, it was a no-go, which,
right.
Was totally expected.
Par for the course.
That has been my relationship with Mike since the day I met him.
Right.
And, and just two odd fellows that never quite seemed to get together. And I didn't know I had come so close to missing him until I just in the last year I ran a picture of that reunion, some of the pictures of me with Mickey and Peter, and also me having a reunion with Coco, who I had not seen since I'd gone up to Mickey's family home and done a bunch of stories.
Right.
And so here I am hugging Coco. And when I'm posting it on Facebook, I go, well, who's this walking out the door as I'm hugging Coco? And it was Mike. So he made his getaway.
Right.
I still got him in the picture. I thought that was pretty funny. So this most recent visit, I was all set up to do video interviews with Peter and Mickey, because this time around it was like, well, why just me say hi to them? Why not share it? I mean, the way I used to share my interviews via Tiger Beat,
right.
It's like with today's technology, I can share the actual experience. They can be there with me for the interview. Well, as it turned out, of course, Peter had a family issue that he had to go home and take care of for a few days.
Right.
And so Mike stepped up. He flew in on Monday for the Thursday show in Mesa, Arizona, and they were just so busy rehearsing and getting the show ready and up to speed that they didn't have time to do interviews with me. I did get to go to the sound check, which was awesome. And what was amazing then was the way that Mike would not let up. He kept interrupting the songs, going, no, it needs to be this. No, I need this key. No, I need this to happen
right
now. They're mainly working on me and Magdalena. But you could see that they were taking this so seriously. They wanted it to be the best show possible. And so when Andrew Sandoval, their tour manager, said they just don't have time to do the interviews that we planned, or Mickey doesn't. And, there was no question I wasn't going to be talking to Mike. And I said, well, Andrew, how about if I interview you? So he gave me a lot of insight into what had been going on the tour. And then I said, well, what about Christian Nesmith? I mean, I used to interview his mom. Whenever Mike wouldn't talk to me, he'd say, why don't you interview Phyllis, and she'll tell you the story about such and such. And so I got to know Phyllis so well, and I thought it would be so awesome to interview Christian. So that's what we did after the show, and it was kind of blowing my mind that I used to see him when he was 3 years old running around, and we'd go out and do pictures at the house and those things. And here I was talking to this 50-plus-year-old man, and it's little Christian. And what a great guy he was. And then the show itself was just superb. They just did such a good job, and the fans were so enthusiastic. Even today, there's nothing like a Monkee concert. Their fans are so devoted. Now they span several generations, and it's a total experience to be a part of that. it's become a phenomenon of its own that they could have this much success and make so many people happy 50 years later.
Now, do you have a favorite off the new Monkees album, Good Times?
Oh, that is hard. I love She Makes Me Laugh.
Mm-hmm.
And then Me and Magdalena is, it's just extraordinary.
It is. What an incredible song. I think it's one of the best they ever recorded. That's saying something 50 years later.
I agree with you completely, Ghosty.
Well, thank you so much, Hannah. Have a great rest of your day.
Well, same to you, and thanks so much, Ghosty. I had a really great time.